London has been very kind to me and my studio in the past couple of years. It's a dream to be working on two significant projects here, one for the London Symphony and one for the V&A. And so I want to thank London for trusting our studio with your city. It's kind of becoming a second home. And it's another place to commiserate with friends and colleagues about mutual political woes, who's got it worse. But one thing I strongly feel that our discipline can help to create progressive social change even when our governments fail us. I want to thank the Architects Journal and the Architectural Review for this fantastic honor. It's really, I have to say, it's really strange to be indoors in the middle of the day, and I feel like we should all dance in this place. But anyway, it's really, fantastic to be here, and it's fantastic to receive this award. Specifically because it celebrates a woman who pried open the field of architecture, not only to generations of female architects, but also to marginalized voices, disciplines, and influences shunned by the architectural establishment. And throughout her pioneering career, Jane Drew borrowed unconventional ideas and methods from other fields and put them in the service of disenfranchised people in downtrodden places. In a time in which liberal values are on the retreat worldwide, it seems more important than ever to carry forth Jane Drew's legacy, her deep sense of empathy, and her dogged commitment to a humanitarian agenda. Indeed, architects need an agenda. We need to challenge the status quo, inherited norms, cultural orthodoxies, and we have to avoid the perils of sleepwalking through our time. So I'm indebted to pioneering women like Jane Drew, and I feel like a beneficiary of the women's movement. I've been able to construct a firm of my own and do progressive work. And that said, I'm also struck by the clear imbalance in the profession. As an educator, I see 50% of my students are women, but only 20% of our staff are women. So there's a huge discrepancy and there's much work to be done. One important note I should make is that architecture is not about a singular heroic male figure, nor a singular heroic female figure. It's a product of many hands and many brains. Rick Scofidio and I began as a dissonant practice in '81, challenging architecture as a self-contained discipline. And we probed the very intersections of the discipline using a large toolkit of media. And then our partnership expanded to include Charles Renfro and Ben Gilmartin, and this added brain power and allowed us to convert some of these provocations into meaningful action in cities and institutions. And this is with a fantastic studio that's very collaborative, from the youngest kids to some oldsters. So I accept this award on behalf of my studio. I've been asked to make a 10-minute presentation, and rather than doing a chronology or doing highlights of the work, I decided to stay within a limited geographical context, a footprint in which a lot of our work in New York has been focused recently. And what's unusual is that it represents a kind of cross-section of scales and genres and architectural programs. So it's a kind of weird cause and effect that was never planned. So here we are. This is the area of West Chelsea, Hudson Yards area, and the High Line comes up from the south and wraps around Hudson Yards, which is the area for this very large development. And on that development is the Shed and also a residential tower. So the High Line is one of our most important projects, and we had the good fortune to be part of this project from 2004, and it keeps going, it never ends. That's the problem with linear projects. They just keep getting, like, it's like sausages. You keep adding more links as you have more money. But anyway, in this 1.5 mile of industrial obsolete infrastructure, it was decided to do a park. And this was by citizen activists that really ruled the day here. We came in because we had a good idea, after they had their good idea. There was a huge amount of opposition to the project. All the property owners in the area felt it devalued their property and pushed to have Mayor Giuliani at that time sign a court order to remove the High Line, to demolish it. So that name, Rudy Giuliani, comes up again today. He doesn't make good decisions. Anyway, fast forward, the High Line is largely built. There's still some sections that we're working on, and it's been hugely successful. Some of you have been there, and this is, Peter was talking about this one spot, which is really my favorite spot, because the High Line is a place really where you can't throw a ball, you can't really do much, you can't bring your dog, you can't ride a bike. It's about doing nothing for a culture that's perpetually in motion and productive. So it's a place to be unproductive, to just kind of hang out, to walk, to sit. And this place, specifically to watch the taillights of traffic going up 10th Avenue. And we strongly feel in the studio that there's something very beautiful and powerful about the everyday. We just don't look at it hard enough. And this is an area that's not part of the vegetated High Line. It's part of the just a view of what we think of as abject. But yet, people are compelled to sit there and watch. The High Line was predicted when it was initially argued to service maybe 400,000 people a year. Last year here, at the time of this diagram, is 7.3. Actually, last year was 8 million people came on the High Line. So, what does success actually mean? Well, one of the things it means is that the High Line has been admired and copied all over the world. In some cases, and I would say in the majority of cases, in the right way, thinking about limited resources and our desire to be in public space, given that we're on our devices all the time. So linking up that need for social interface with adaptive reuse is really, really important. When the High Line is a kind of scapegoat for new construction, it's something else. But this, I feel, is a victory. It changed a lot in this area of Chelsea, and you could see these statistics. The city invested about $150 million into the project, and there's $5 billion of real estate investment, $1 billion in tax revenue upcoming, and so forth. So a lot of things came out of this, as well as a real estate boom, one that no one had expected. And this was, I have to say that after working on the High Line for over a decade and witnessing this dramatic transformation, I had a kind of post-occupancy reflection. And that's the question, what are the ethics of entering into and altering a city's life cycle? What's the measure of success for the architectural catalyst? And can the catalyst fall victim to its own success? What is the responsibility of the architect in shaping the aftermath of change that they might have produced? Well, I don't know the answers to that, but I felt compelled to engage the park again as a great urban stage for performance specifically about the speed of change of the contemporary city. and the winners and the losers in that change. So the Milan Opera, a biography of 7 o'clock, was a performance that we created. We also, I co-directed and produced. So the left side of the slide and the right side, it's that New York that was there before and the New York that is materializing now. So, you know, some people could say this stuff on the left is bad and stuff on the right is good, and others could say the opposite. Well, you know, in fact, the piece is really about this kind of resonance between this nostalgia that we have for an irretrievable past and this apprehension we have for an alienating future. And the project is about the hyper-present. So we use the entire stretch of the High Line for a performance with 1,000 singers, and the singers were static and the audience wove through, basically promenaded through the music. These were our collaborators, David Lang as composer, Claudia Rankin, and Ann Carson as poets who wrote the lyrics for the music and also for the spoken word. A biography of 7 o'clock. So 7 o'clock is the time that the performance happened every night, but it's also a time that represents the kind of change we're talking about. We associate 7 o'clock with stability, with home, the time that dad comes home from work. The family below is not exactly connected at 7 o'clock, but 7 o'clock means something different to different cultures and different families today. And so we were very interested in the diversity of New York and telling those stories about 7 o'clock for New Yorkers. So I'll just run through a series of images of, this was October, the first week of October of this past year. It was an incredibly difficult performance to stage, 1,000 singers a mile and a half apart. These are mostly avocational singers that sing for their church choirs or schools or community centers. We also took spaces off of the High Line, the very shallow space of the interface between deep space and actually the High Line and the views, which are marketed to the highest bidder. Because now the High Line, whereas before the High Line was unsightly, today the High Line is valued, the High Line view is valued. So just a couple of images. The performers were all separated, so they weren't singing in unison, and they were singing a series of musical cells in a kind of canon-like format, and they were to have eye contact with the audience. And this was what was so incredible about the piece in the end, was the connection between the audience and the singers. So really breaking down the fourth wall a lot. Some more windows. This is a familiar one, Zaha's building. And I'm gonna just play a little bit of the music.
The moment just before night, twilight, the sun.
Make believe, make so.
Bar the bleach, towel the river,
Shoe the clock,
all the same.
foam the dust, pour the bleach, towel the river. It's gone crazy. No grocery store around here anymore. No place to get your shoes fixed. They all want what they want, but they want you not to have it. Punch, rooks, sharks, rush hour. The thing about the city, there's a level of anger.
So, changing the channel just a little bit to the north of the High Line is the Shed. It's a project that is currently in construction and is actually going to open very, very soon, like in a month. We need another 6 months. And I'll go through that very quickly because I know I'm over time. So here is the site. This was a project that we put on the table with our friend David Rockwell on a parcel of land that was protected for cultural use in a large commercial development. And the proposal was to make, New York City cultural institutions are very siloed. We wanted to make one for the future, one that could be transformed, an ultimate flexible machine for making art. And what is art in the future? In 10 years, 20 years, the answer is nobody really knows what it is, but it will be multidisciplinary, it will be flexible but not necessarily generic, scalable, and indoor-outdoor. And Cedric Price was, and the Fun Palace was a kind of source of inspiration, as Peter's work as well, all from that era. So flexible footprint, a moving shed, and a fixed building using industrial crane technology with a fixed frame building and a more unusual structure, which is a continuous theatrical grid above this very large space. And so covered by ETFE pillows. And so this other project that we did on that site was this commercial tower. And it's approximately 80 stories tall. And so this is yet another part of our work. And it's one that we've embraced, but we did it stealthily to protect the shed and to give it much more space. So we're using the lower 10 floors for the shed's back of house. So all of its footprint can be used for cultural and public purposes. The tower itself, which I'm proud of, and also done with David Rockwell, basically morphs from an orthogonal footprint at the city at grade into a cloverleaf with panoramic views above, and just some stacked floor plates, 3 large fixed spaces that are large footprint that could be used for anything, and the moving shed. And so this little video, I'll just go through a little bit of it. That shed moves in 5 minutes and uses the horsepower of 1 Prius engine. And the objective of the whole thing is to just gain more space, but not all of the time. If you don't need it, you don't have to heat it or cool it or program it. So you can fold it back and have open space for cultural use or any use. So it really functions like an industrial piece of infrastructure. And in fact, we think of it as an architecture of infrastructure, mainly strong, with enough power and loading capacity to do anything. And this little video doesn't demonstrate its loading capacity, but you can see the figures up on top that can basically produce any kind of show, fly anything in there. And it can sort of morph and change shape and be low and have 30,000 square feet of space, or it can be darkened and could be used for for film or any other kind of theatrical functions. And effectively, okay, so I'm gonna just go through this very quickly. Kinetic system, large wheels being sort of produced, crazy scale, and the system that operates it above and controlled off your belt. Some in construction images, and I'm just going to say, as this plays, that everything is a consequence of everything else. So in this site, we had a public park that was designed for the city of New York. It actually led to the development of the area, which produced an opportunity to do the shed, which would never have been done otherwise. To do the shed and to enable it, we took on a commercial tower, totally separate client, and this was really a kind of sacrifice, but also a great opportunity to do something that's not in our wheelhouse. And all of that led to the Milan Opera, which comes right back to our point of origin, is doing independent projects as a basis of our research, as a product of our research. And because we really imagine that work in real space. So this is, the shed is opening in a month, and it opens with Soundtrack of America, which is, this great project with some of the folks that you can recognize here, Steve McQueen and Quincy Jones. And it's a history of African American music that goes back centuries and goes into the present. And that's Soundtrack of America. And so I just want to conclude that this is a kind of a series of works where we found agency to do more than was just handed over to us. So the High Line was a consequence of agency that was taken by citizen activists. The shed we put on the table, and we enabled it by doing a commercial project. And the Milan Opera, this really ambitious theatrical work, was done. We raised the money and we just did it. I would just say that architects just really, to defend our cities, just have to get more active, because our cities are getting more privatized. We have to protect space, we have to rethink institutions, keep up with the speed of technological, ecological, social, and political change. And if architecture fails to position itself accordingly to the kinds of changes that are happening around us, we run the risk of the institution of architecture itself falling into irrelevance. Thank you for this award, and thank you for this platform.